Hello, guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Vijeta, and today we shall start with the measure for from measure the quotes. That is, we have finished the plot where we see how Isabella is proposed by the Duke, and now she's kind of, you know, numb. I mean, silent, speechless because she wished to become a nun, and now when she wanted that, a powerful man just proposed to her. So she's kind of confused and basically surprised or shocked. So now, when we come to the famous quotes from measure to measure from for measure, our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. Life is a paradise to what we fear of death. Well, heaven forgive him and forgive us all. Some rise by sin and some by virtue fall. Some run from breaks of ice and answer none, and some condemned for a fault alone. By Aeschylus in Act 2, Scene 1. Oh, it is excellent to have a giant strength, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant. The best of rest is sleep, and that thou oft provokest, yet grows thee fairest, thy death which is no more. Music oft hath such a charm to make bad good, and good provoke to harm. Such powerful quotes. Let me hear you speak, Father. I have spirit to do anything that appears not foul in the truth of my spirit. So these were the quotes from Measure for Measure. Now we come to another play, very well known play called Othello, written in 1602, 1604, in those years. And even in India, you know this movie called Omkara, which was an adaptation of the play. So Othello is a very well known play, and it is subtitled The Moor of Venice, and it is a tragedy of passion. You know, a lot of even Laurence Olivier, he also performed in this movie adaptation. He was also Hamlet, so that is something. S.T. Coleridge applied the term motiveless malignity to the character Iago. Very important question. The major source of the play is Plintheos Hecatomythe. I am apologizing if there is a spelling mistake, but it's along these lines only. Plot: Othello begins on a street in Venice where a rich man, Roderigo, and Iago used to live. Roderigo wanted to marry Desdemona, daughter of Brabantio, but they found that Desdemona has secretly married Othello. Brabantio, the Venetian senator, demands Othello's arrest, but ultimately he accepts the wholeheartedness of Desdemona's love for Othello when they appear before the Senate. So they are kind of not very satisfied with Othello because he's dark skinned and his social status is not equal to Desdemona's. But ultimately, they understand that theirs is a true love, and so things are settled. Now, Iago is scheming against Othello because Othello chooses Cassio as his lieutenant instead of Iago. And I think Mr. Dan Kavanagh, I don't remember the name, but the professor who was Lockhart in Harry Potter's second part, I think he was Iago in the 1995 or 97 version of Othello. Just check it once. Yeah, so that is something. And there's a Turkish attack on Cyprus, and Othello leaves immediately when Desdemona, Iago, Cassio, and Roderigo in Cyprus. Iago contrives to discredit Cassio, and Othello dismisses Cassio. In a soliloquy, Iago explains to the audience that eliminating Cassio is the first step in his plan to ruin Othello. Iago advises Cassio to appear to Desdemona and implants in Othello's mind a suspicion regarding Desdemona and Cassio. In another soliloquy, Iago tells that he will frame Cassio and Desdemona as lovers to make Othello jealous. Desdemona is quite sympathetic to Cassio's request and promises that she will do everything she can to make Othello forgive his former lieutenant. Othello inquires whether it was Cassio who just parted from his wife. So things are moving forward, and Iago is on his way to make Othello jealous of or suspicious of Desdemona's acts. And Iago begins to kindle Othello's fire of jealousy and replies, "No, sure, I cannot think it, that he would steal away so guilty like seeing you coming." This act deepens Othello's suspicion. So Iago is playing this game where he's not certain, he's acting like he's not certain of what is happening, and yet he is kind of giving a hint. So it is very subtle, but it is very intentional. So you must have experienced this for yourself when you see subtle intentionality in a lot of people, especially people who don't wish to cause any harm by giving their opinion freely. And Iago is being very diabolical here. Desdemona accidentally drops a handkerchief, Othello's first token of love, which Emilia, wife of Iago, picks up, and mentioning to the audience that Iago has always wanted her to steal it for him. So Emilia does that. Iago gives the handkerchief to Cassio, and Cassio gives it to his mistress Bianca, a prostitute. Iago informs Othello that he has seen Cassio wipe his beard with Desdemona's handkerchief, the first gift that Othello gave her. So, this is something. Now, Othello humiliates Desdemona and accuses her of being a whore. Iago urges Rodrigo to kill Cassio, but he manages only to wound him. Iago kills Rodrigo. Othello kills Desdemona for her infidelity in her bedchamber. In the presence of Venetian representatives, Emilia reveals Iago's guilt, and Iago kills his wife in rage. Othello cries for his guilt and wounds Iago. Othello makes a speech about how he would like to be remembered, then he stabs himself. The play closes with a speech by Lodovico. He gives Othello's house and goods to Graziano and orders that Iago be executed. So, a very terrible ending of a play. And Cassio takes command in Cyprus. Desdemona's last words are especially cryptic. When asked who killed her, she remarks, "Nobody. I myself. Commend me to my kind lord." I mean, it can be interpreted as in a lot of ways. Maybe Desdemona is regretful that she chose such a man who was so easily fooled or swayed away that ultimately he became the reason for her death. Or maybe she is just saying that it's the plight of being a woman in those times where one wrong move can, kill you instantly. And or maybe she's saying that maybe she was not strong enough to assert herself, to prove her innocence, to prove how rightful she was. So maybe Desdemona's internalizing might be interpreted in a lot of ways. We will never know, but these words are quite powerful. And Othello's speech: "Roast means sulfur, wash means steep down gulfs of molten fire." Othello, when he realizes what he has done, he is suffering, and he understands the implications of what he has done, killing an innocent woman who loved him deeply. So these are his last exclamations, if I may say so. Important quotes from Othello: "Oh, beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. Men in rage strike those that wish them best. I would not put a thief in my mouth to steal my brains. I kissed thee ere I killed thee. No way but this, killing myself, to die upon a kiss. O God, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains." Again by Cassio, Scene 3, Act 2. Very important. "Come, be a man. Drown thyself, drown cats and blind puppies." Very powerful speeches, very deftly written. "Have not we affections and desire for sport? and frailty as men have. If I were the Moor, I would not want to be Iago. There is the magic in the web. Shakespeare, Act 3, Scene 4. To mourn a mischief that is past and gone is the next way to draw new mischief on. To be poor but content is actually to be quite rich. To be quite rich. But you can have endless riches and still be as poor as anyone if you're always afraid of losing your richness. Very true. Very true. Even very relevant, in fact. There are many events in the womb of time which will be delivered. Very interesting. Very well written. I think that one is my favorite. When devil do the worst sins, they first put on the pretense of goodness and innocence, as I am doing now. So these were the quotes that were written in those times, and you can understand why Shakespeare was celebrated because of his flair, I suppose. Now, the tragedy of King Lear, written in around 1605 to 1606, it's a tragedy by Shakespeare. It is derived from the legend of Lear of Britain, a mythological pre-Roman Celtic king. In 1681, the play was revised with a happy non-tragic ending by Nahum Tate. And important characters are King Lear, King of Britain, Goneril, eldest, Regan, middle, Cordelia, youngest, the three daughters of King Lear, Duke of Albany, Goneril's husband, Duke of Cornwall, Regan's husband, Earl of Gloucester, General of Lear's court, Earl of Kent, later disguised as Caius, Edgar, Gloucester's son, Edmund, Gloucester's illegitimate son, fool, Lear's fool, King of France, suitor and later husband of Cordelia. So, another rich play with a lot of interesting characters. The plot: King Lear of Britain, while retiring from his duties, wanted to divide his monarchy around his three daughters, among his three daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. He declares that he'll offer the largest share to the one who loves him most. Ultimately, Lear divides his property into two parts, only because his younger daughter, Cordelia, refuses to say anything about her love for him, saying that nothing, my lord. And it made Lear infuriated, and he didn't give anything to Cordelia. Now, I think a lot of people know that Cordelia didn't say anything because she was not a flatterer. She truly loved her father. And a lot of people interpret it as her being not able to give an amount to the insurmountable affection she felt for her father. So it ran deeper than that, and she couldn't explain it in words, which was misinterpreted by her father. And this happens. She was left penniless. Earl of Kent objects to Lear's unfair treatment of Cordelia. Upon this, King Lear is enraged and banishes him from the country. So, yeah. Earlier, the Duke of Burgundy was a suitor to Cordelia, but after she was disinherited, Burgundy withdraws his suit. But the King of France is impressed and he marries her. Meanwhile, Gloucester has introduced his illegitimate son Edmund to Kent. Lear announces that he will live with Goneril and Regan alternately. He reserves 100 knights for him. Goneril and Regan speak privately, revealing that their declamations of love were fake and they viewed Lear as a foolish old man. So his eldest daughters actually don't love him, they were just flatterers. Edmund resents his illegitimate status and plots to dispose of his legitimate older brother, Edgar. Edmund tricks Gloucester, his father, with a forged letter, making him think that Edgar plans to usurp the estate. So there are two stories running in parallel: Edmund's story and the King Lear and his daughter's story. Kent returns from exile in disguise under the name Caius, and Lear hires him as a servant. Lear and Caius quarrel with Oswald, Goneril's steward. Lear discovers that now Goneril no longer respects him, and she orders him to behave properly and reduce his retinue from 100. The fool mocks Lear's misfortune. Edmund learns from Curran, a courtier, that there is likely to be war between Albany and Cornwall, and Regan and Cornwall are to arrive at Gloucester's house that evening. Taking advantage of the situation, Edmund fakes an attack by Edgar, and Gloucester disinherits Edgar. So Edmund is quite clever here, although very cunning. When Caius took the message of Lear to Regan, he quarrels with Oswald again, and thus Caius is put in the stocks by Regan and her husband Cornwall. When Lear arrives there and objects to his messenger's mistreatment, Regan dismisses her father, as Goneril did earlier. Lear is enraged, but he does nothing because what can he do now? Goneril also arrives there and supports Regan against King Lear. Lear rushes out into a storm to rant against his ungrateful daughters, accompanied by a mocking fool. The fool is always there, he's always taunting him, while actually showing him the mirror, which he deserves. And Lear's only companion is the fool and Caius now. Wandering on the heath after storm, Edgar meets Lear in disguise of a madman named Tom O'Bedlin. Very important question. So a lot of things are happening. Gondrel also arrives there, as we've already discussed. I think I repeated the slide. So Edmund betrays Gloucester to Cornwall, Regan, and Gondrel. He reveals on evidence that his father, Gloucester, knows of a French invasion to reinstate King Lear, and in fact, French army has landed in Britain. Now Edmund leaves with Gondrel to inform her husband Albany about the French attack. Gloucester is arrested by Regan and Cornwall. They gouge out Gloucester's eyes, but they were attacked by a servant who could not bear the devastating scene. Regan kills the servant. Regan tells Gloucester that he is betrayed by his bastard son. Quite a lot of things happen, you see, and you can understand the richness of this play by the characters and how their actions are moving the plot forward, and not in a whimsical way, but in a very in a way that is affecting the whole scenario, the whole mood of the play. And that was the beauty of King Lear, which is the reason why this play is remembered among some of the most remembered plays of Shakespeare. And I hope that you understood the lecture so far. If you have any comments, comment box is open. If you liked my video, please like it, share, and subscribe. And I will meet you all in the next video. Thank you.